Clara Montgomery's hand stung from slapping the dusty wanted poster against the wall of Grayson's general store. She'd show them all. She'd find the rustlers who had stolen her father's prize cattle without any man's help, especially not from the sheriff who was more interested in his whiskey than keeping law and order in Cottonwood Springs, Colorado. $500 for information leading to the return of my father's cattle, she announced to the handful of townsfolk who stood gawking at the 22-year-old woman in riding boots and a practical split skirt. And I'm offering it myself. The year was 1878, and women were expected to keep to their place, especially the daughter of the wealthiest rancher in the county. But Clara had never been one for expectations. Clara Elizabeth Montgomery. Her father's voice boomed from across the street. James Montgomery stomped toward his daughter, his face as red as the Arizona sunset. What in tarnation do you think you're doing? Clara squared her shoulders. What you should have done 3 days ago, father. Taking action. The onlookers backed away as James Montgomery reached his daughter. At 52, he was still an imposing figure, with broad shoulders and a thick mustache that twitched when he was angry. Right now, it was practically dancing. This is not proper behavior for a lady, he growled, tearing down the poster. This is precisely why no sensible man has offered for your hand. You're too stubborn for your own good. Clara lifted her chin. I'm too stubborn to marry, you mean? At this rate, you'll die an old maid, her father retorted. Better an old maid than a miserable wife, Clara shot back. She'd seen enough loveless marriages to know she wanted no part of such an arrangement. A deep chuckle drew their attention. A tall man leaned against the hitching post, arms crossed over his chest. His face was partially shadowed by a worn Stetson, but Clara could make out the strong line of his jaw and the amused quirk of his lips. Something funny, mister? James Montgomery demanded. The stranger pushed himself away from the post and stepped forward, revealing clear blue eyes that held Clara's gaze for a moment too long. Not at all, sir, the man said, removing his hat. His dark blonde hair caught the sunlight. Just appreciating a woman who knows her own mind. And who might you be? James asked suspiciously. Dawson Reed, the man replied, extending his hand. New ranch hand over at the Carson place. James reluctantly shook the offered hand. James Montgomery. This is my daughter, Clara. The one too stubborn to marry? Dawson asked with a hint of a smile. Good. So am I. Clara felt heat rise to her cheeks, but whether from embarrassment or something else, she couldn't quite tell. Well, Mr. Reed, she said coolly, my stubbornness aside, I'm determined to find who stole my father's cattle. If you hear anything, the reward stands. I don't need your money, Miss Montgomery, Dawson said, but I might just help you anyway. Clara doesn't need your help, James interjected. She's coming home where she belongs. Actually, father, Clara said, her voice steely with determination, I'm going to speak with Mr. Peterson at the livery. He mentioned seeing strangers heading north the night the cattle disappeared. She turned on her heel and marched away, aware of the whispers that followed her. Your daughter is something else, Mr. Montgomery, she heard Dawson Reed say. That's one way of putting it, her father replied gruffly. Clara smiled to herself. Her father didn't understand that the world was changing. Women were attending universities now, voting in some territories, even running businesses. She wasn't going to be pushed into marriage just because society expected it. The livery stable smelled of hay and horse, familiar scents that Clara had loved since childhood. Mr. Peterson, a wiry man with perpetually dirty fingernails, looked up from shoeing a horse. Miss Montgomery, he said with a nod. Figured you'd come by eventually. Tell me about the men you saw, Clara prompted, leaning against the stall door. Peterson described 3 riders heading north around midnight 2 nights ago. One had a distinctive white horse, he added. Palomino with a blaze like lightning down its face. Clara committed the description to memory. Thank you, Mr. Peterson. Miss Montgomery. The deep voice startled her. Dawson Reed stood in the livery doorway, his tall frame blocking much of the light. Mind if I join you? Before Clara could respond, Peterson spoke up. You work for Carson, don't you? Seen you breaking that Mustang last week. Fine horsemanship. Thank you, Dawson said with a modest nod. I've been working with horses since I was a boy. I don't need an escort, Mr. Reed, Clara said firmly. Never thought you did, Dawson replied. But I might have information about your cattle. That caught her attention. What information? Not here, Dawson said, glancing at Peterson. Let's talk outside. Clara followed him into the sunlight, keeping a proper distance between them. Well, I saw a herd being moved north of Carson's property 2 nights ago, Dawson said. Unusual time for a cattle drive. And they weren't Carson's stock. How do you know? Different brand. And Carson doesn't run that many head anyway. Clara's heart quickened. Did you see who was driving them? 3 men. One riding a palomino with a distinctive blaze. Clara's eyes widened. That matches Peterson's description. Did you recognize any of them? Dawson shook his head. I'm new to these parts. But I could track them. I can track them myself, Clara insisted. I'm sure you can, Dawson agreed, surprising her. But 4 eyes are better than 2. And it might be dangerous. Clara hesitated. She was a good rider and knew how to use a rifle. But going after cattle thieves alone would be foolish. I don't need a protector. How about a partner? Dawson suggested. The word hung between them. Partners. Equals. Not a man coming to a helpless woman's rescue, but 2 people working together. If we find the cattle, Clara said slowly, the reward is yours. I don't want your money, Dawson repeated. I just can't abide thieves. Clara studied him carefully. There was something about Dawson Reed that didn't quite fit the profile of a simple ranch hand. His speech was too refined, his manner too confident. Who are you really, Mr. Reed? A smile touched his lips. Just a man who respects a woman with spirit. When do we leave? Dawn tomorrow, Clara decided. Meet me at the north edge of town. I'll be there, Dawson promised. Clara watched him walk away, his stride long and sure. She didn't trust him entirely, but something told her Dawson Reed was a man who kept his word. When Clara returned home, her father was waiting. The Montgomery ranch house was the grandest in the county, a testament to her father's success since arriving in Colorado 20 years ago with nothing but dreams and determination. Have you come to your senses? James demanded. I'm going after the cattle, father, Clara announced. Mr. Reed has offered to help. That drifter? James scoffed. We know nothing about him. He saw the cattle being moved north 2 nights ago, Clara countered. And he's an excellent tracker, according to Mr. Peterson. Her father's expression darkened. I forbid it, Clara. It's too dangerous. I'm 22 years old, father. I'm not asking permission. James slammed his fist on the table. This is exactly why you'll never find a husband. You're too headstrong, too independent. A man wants a woman who respects his authority. Then I'll never marry, Clara replied calmly. Because I'll never pretend to be less than I am. Her father's face softened slightly. I worry about you, Clara. Your mother was the same way stubborn as a mule. It's what made me fall in love with her. The mention of her mother, gone 7 years now, made Clara's throat tighten. I miss her too, father. She'd be proud of you, James admitted grudgingly. But she'd also tell you to be careful. I will be, Clara promised. Mr. Reed and I leave at dawn. Her father sighed. I suppose I can't stop you. But take Jacob with you. Jacob was their most trusted ranch hand. No, Clara said firmly. Just Mr. Reed and me. We'll attract less attention that way. James Montgomery looked as though he might argue further, but instead, he simply nodded. You've got 2 days. If you're not back by then, I'm coming after you with every man on this ranch. Fair enough, Clara agreed. That night, Clara packed supplies and checked her rifle. She dressed practically in riding clothes and sturdy boots, her honey-brown hair braided tightly. Sleep eluded her as she contemplated the journey ahead and her unexpected companion. True to his word, Dawson Reed was waiting at the edge of town when Clara arrived just as dawn was breaking. He sat atop a magnificent black gelding, leading a second horse. Good morning, he greeted her. I took the liberty of borrowing a mount from Carson. Hope you don't mind. That's thoughtful, Clara admitted, transferring her supplies to the saddlebags. They rode north in companionable silence as the sun climbed higher in the Colorado sky. The land was beautiful, with rolling hills giving way to more rugged terrain. Clara had always loved this country, wild and untamed as it was. You ride well, Dawson observed after a while. My father insisted I learn properly, Clara replied. No side-saddle nonsense. Dawson chuckled. He doesn't seem the type to encourage such independence in his daughter. He's complicated, Clara said. He wants me to be strong, but not too strong. Independent, but not too independent. And what do you want, Clara Montgomery? Dawson asked, using her first name without permission. Clara should have been offended by the familiarity, but somehow, it felt right. I want to live on my own terms. Is that so much to ask? Not to me, Dawson said. But to many, yes. They rode on, following faint tracks that only Dawson seemed able to see. By midday, they stopped to rest the horses by a small stream. How did you learn to track so well? Clara asked, passing him a canteen. Dawson took a drink before answering. My father was a scout for the army. Taught me everything he knew. And how did you end up at Carson's ranch? A shadow passed over Dawson's face. I've been moving around for a while. Needed a fresh start. Clara sensed there was more to the story, but she didn't press. Everyone had secrets, after all. There, Dawson said suddenly, pointing to disturbed earth near the stream. They watered the cattle here, not more than a day ago. We're gaining on them. They mounted up and continued their pursuit. As the day wore on, the terrain became more challenging, with narrow passes and steep inclines. By late afternoon, Dawson held up his hand, signaling Clara to stop. Smoke, he said quietly, pointing to a thin wisp rising above a cluster of trees ahead. Could be our rustlers. They dismounted and approached on foot, tethering their horses in a protected gully. Crawling to the edge of a ridge, they peered down at a small camp. 3 men sat around a fire, while a herd of cattle bearing the Montgomery brand grazed in a natural corral formed by rock formations. That's them, Clara whispered. Those are our cattle. Dawson studied the camp carefully. 3 men, all armed. We'll need to be smart about this. We could wait until dark, Clara suggested. When they're asleep. Dawson nodded approvingly. Good thinking. We'll circle around and approach from the east. That way we can get to the cattle first. They retreated to their horses and set up a small camp of their own, far enough away to avoid detection. As they shared a cold supper, Clara found herself studying Dawson's profile in the fading light. Why are you really helping me? She asked. And don't say it's because you hate thieves. Dawson was quiet for a long moment. Let's just say I understand what it's like to have something important taken from you. Clara could sense the pain behind his words. I'm sorry. Don't be, Dawson replied. It was a long time ago. Night fell, bringing with it a chill that made Clara shiver despite her jacket. Without a word, Dawson removed his coat and placed it around her shoulders. I'm fine, she protested. Being stubborn doesn't mean you have to be cold, Dawson said with a smile. The gesture touched Clara more than she cared to admit. They sat in silence, watching the stars appear one by one in the vast Colorado sky. My mother used to say that stars are windows to heaven, Clara said softly. That she could see my grandparents looking down on us. A beautiful thought, Dawson replied. My mother said something similar. Is she still living? Dawson shook his head. Lost both my parents in a fire when I was 18. Our ranch in Wyoming. That's when I started drifting. I'm sorry, Clara said, understanding now the loss he'd alluded to earlier. It was 10 years ago, Dawson said. I've made my peace with it. Clara wondered if that was true. She still missed her mother every day, and it had been 7 years. It's time, Dawson said, checking his pocket watch. The moon's high enough to give us light, but not so bright we'll be easily spotted. They moved silently toward the rustlers' camp. As expected, 2 of the men were asleep, while the third kept watch, his head nodding as he fought drowsiness. The cattle were quiet, having settled for the night. Dawson motioned for Clara to circle around to the far side of the makeshift corral. They'd agreed on a plan. Clara would open an escape route for the cattle, while Dawson neutralized the guard. Once the cattle began moving, the commotion would wake the other rustlers, but by then, Clara and Dawson would have the upper hand. Clara crept along the edge of the rock formation, finding the narrow opening that served as the corral's gate. A simple rope barrier held it closed. She waited, watching Dawson's shadowy figure approach the guard. What happened next was so quick Clara barely had time to react. The guard's head snapped up, fully alert. He shouted a warning as he reached for his gun. Dawson lunged forward, tackling the man to the ground. The other rustlers woke instantly, scrambling for their weapons. Clara didn't hesitate. She cut the rope barrier and slapped the nearest steer on the rump. Hi-ya, she shouted, causing the cattle to surge forward through the opening. As planned, the sudden movement of the herd created chaos. Gunshots rang out. Clara ducked behind a boulder, drawing her own rifle. She spotted one of the rustlers taking aim at Dawson, who was still wrestling with the guard. Clara fired, her bullet striking the ground near the rustler's feet. The man yelped and dove for cover. Dawson delivered a final punch to the guard, rendering him unconscious, then rolled toward shelter as bullets whizzed past. Clara fired again, keeping the rustlers pinned down while the cattle scattered into the night. "Clara," Dawson called. "Fall back to the horses." She moved from boulder to boulder, using the confusion to retreat. One of the rustlers spotted her and fired. The bullet struck rock near her head, sending fragments flying. Clara felt a sharp sting on her cheek, but kept moving. Dawson appeared beside her, his gun drawn. "You're hurt," he said, noticing the blood on her face. "It's nothing," Clara insisted. "Just a scratch." Together, they made it back to their horses. The rustlers were too busy trying to recapture the scattered cattle to give serious pursuit. "We need to round up your father's herd," Dawson said, mounting his horse. "Before they scatter too far." Clara wiped blood from her cheek and nodded. "Let's go." They worked through the night, gradually collecting the Montgomery cattle. Dawson's skill with livestock was impressive. He seemed to anticipate where the animals would run and headed them off with remarkable efficiency. By dawn, they had recovered most of the herd. "You're more than a ranch hand," Clara observed as they drove the cattle toward home. "No ordinary cowboy handles cattle like that." Dawson smiled enigmatically. "Maybe I'm just good at what I do. Or maybe you're not who you say you are," Clara challenged. "Would it matter if I wasn't?" The question hung between them as they continued their journey. Clara found herself watching Dawson the way he sat his horse with natural grace, the quiet authority in his voice when he gave directions, the intelligence in his blue eyes. No, he was definitely not just another drifter. They made camp that evening. The cattle settled nearby. Clara's cheek had stopped bleeding, but Dawson insisted on cleaning the wound. "It might scar," he said, gently dabbing at it with a damp cloth. "A badge of honor," Clara replied with a small smile. "You were brave back there," Dawson said. "Not many women or men, for that matter, would have kept their heads as you did. I told you I could handle myself." "You did," Dawson agreed. "I never doubted it." His hand lingered on her cheek a moment longer than necessary. Clara felt her heart quicken. She pulled away, suddenly uncomfortable with their proximity. "We should get some rest," she said. "Long ride tomorrow." Dawson nodded, respecting her withdrawal. "I'll take first watch." Clara wrapped herself in her blanket, but sleep eluded her. She was acutely aware of Dawson's presence nearby, of the strange connection she felt to this man she barely knew. It was unsettling and exhilarating all at once. When she finally dozed off, she dreamed of fire and loss, of stars as windows to heaven, and of blue eyes that seemed to see straight through her defenses. The next morning, they resumed their journey home. As they crested a hill overlooking Cottonwood Springs, Clara felt a strange reluctance. Once they returned the cattle, there would be no reason for Dawson Reed to remain in her life. "What will you do now?" she asked as they paused to rest the horses. "Hadn't thought that far ahead," Dawson admitted. "Carson only hired me for the month." "You could stay," Clara suggested, then quickly added, "The valley always needs good ranch hands." Dawson studied her face. "Is that what you want, Clara? For me to stay on as a ranch hand?" The question felt weighted with meaning. "I don't know what I want," she answered honestly. "I think you do," Dawson said softly. "You're just too stubborn to admit it." Clara laughed despite herself. "There's that word again." "It's not a bad thing," Dawson said. "Being stubborn means knowing your own mind, standing by your convictions. My father doesn't see it that way." "Your father loves you," Dawson observed. "He just doesn't understand you." They continued down into the valley, the cattle moving steadily before them. As they approached the Montgomery ranch, Clara could see her father and several ranch hands riding out to meet them. James Montgomery's face reflected disbelief, then pride as he took in the recovered herd. "Clara," he called, urging his horse forward. "You did it." "We did it," Clara corrected, nodding toward Dawson. Her father eyed Dawson with newfound respect. "Mr. Reed, it seems I owe you my gratitude. Your daughter did most of the work," Dawson said. "I just followed her lead." James noticed the cut on Clara's cheek and frowned. "You're hurt." "It's nothing," Clara assured him. Just a scratch from some flying rock fragments. Her father's expression darkened. There was gunfire? The rustlers weren't willing to give up their prize without a fight, Dawson explained. Your daughter handled herself admirably. James looked from Dawson to Clara, then back again. Something in his expression shifted. You two must be exhausted. Come back to the house. We'll talk over supper. The Montgomery dining room was formal by Western standards, with a long oak table and matching chairs that James had shipped all the way from St. Louis. Clara, freshly bathed and dressed in a simple blue dress, felt strangely nervous as she waited for Dawson to join them. When he entered, she barely recognized him. Gone was the dusty cowboy. In his place stood a well-groomed gentleman in a clean shirt and vest. His hair was combed back from his forehead, highlighting the strong lines of his face. Mr. Reed, her father greeted. Please sit. Dinner conversation focused mainly on the rustlers. Dawson described the men in detail, and James promised to send the information to the sheriff. Though I doubt Sheriff Tanner will do much, James added with disgust. Man's as useful as a screen door on a submarine. Perhaps the territorial marshal would be more effective, Dawson suggested. I could send a telegram tomorrow. Clara glanced at him sharply. You know the marshal? A slight flush colored Dawson's cheeks. We've crossed paths. James Montgomery studied their guest with renewed interest. You're more than a simple ranch hand, aren't you, Mr. Reed? Dawson set down his fork carefully. I suppose there's no point in pretending otherwise. My full name is Dawson Reed Thompson. Until 6 months ago, I was a deputy U.S. Marshal based in Denver. Clara's eyes widened. I knew it. I knew you weren't just a drifter. Why the deception? James asked, though his tone held more curiosity than accusation. I needed to step away for a while, Dawson explained. There was an incident, a bank robbery in Denver. My partner was killed. He paused, the memory clearly painful. I should have seen it coming. Should have been faster. It wasn't your fault, Clara said softly. Dawson met her gaze. That's what everyone said. But I couldn't shake the guilt. So I resigned and decided to try a simpler life for a while. As a ranch hand, James mused. Honest work, close to the land, Dawson confirmed. It's been restorative. Clara felt a deeper understanding of Dawson forming. His loss, his guilt, his need for redemption, it all made sense now. Will you go back, she asked. To the marshal service? Dawson shrugged. I don't know. Maybe someday. Well, James said, refilling Dawson's glass. You've certainly proven your worth these past few days. If you're looking for more permanent employment, the Montgomery Ranch could use a man with your skills. Clara held her breath, waiting for Dawson's response. That's a generous offer, Mr. Montgomery, Dawson said. But I wouldn't want to accept a position out of gratitude alone. It's not gratitude, James insisted. It's good business. I need someone who can think quickly, handle themselves in a crisis, and isn't afraid of hard work. You fit the bill. Dawson glanced at Clara. And how would Miss Montgomery feel about that arrangement? All eyes turned to Clara. She felt a blush rising to her cheeks. I think it would be an excellent arrangement. After dinner, Clara escaped to the porch, needing fresh air and time to sort through her conflicted feelings. The night was clear, stars dotting the sky like diamonds on black velvet. She heard the door open behind her and knew without turning that it was Dawson. Beautiful night, he said, coming to stand beside her at the railing. Yes, Clara agreed. Are you going to accept my father's offer? Dawson turned to face her. That depends. On what? On whether there's a reason for me to stay beyond employment. Clara's heart raced. What other reason would there be? You know the answer to that, Clara, Dawson said softly. From the moment I saw you posting that reward notice, something told me you were different. Special. Because I'm stubborn? Clara asked with a small smile. Because you're authentic, Dawson corrected. You don't pretend to be something you're not. In a world full of people playing roles, that's rare. And precious. Clara turned to face him fully. I've never met anyone like you either, Dawson Reed Thompson. You treated me as an equal from the start. No man has ever done that before. Maybe you've been meeting the wrong men, Dawson suggested. Maybe, Clara agreed. Or maybe I was waiting for the right one. Dawson stepped closer. Your father said you're too stubborn to marry. And you said you were too. I might be persuaded to reconsider, Dawson murmured, for the right woman. Clara's breath caught. Are you saying what I think you're saying? I'm saying I'd like to court you properly, Clara Montgomery, Dawson declared. If you'll allow it. Clara felt a smile spreading across her face. I might be persuaded to allow it. Dawson laughed softly. Stubborn till the end. Would you have it any other way? Clara challenged. Not for all the gold in Colorado, Dawson replied. And then he was kissing her, gentle yet certain, as if he'd been waiting to do so since the moment they met. When they finally broke apart, Clara rested her head against his chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart. My father will be insufferably smug about this, she murmured. Let him, Dawson said, stroking her hair. We'll be too busy being happily stubborn together to notice. 3 months later, Clara stood before the mirror in her bedroom, hardly recognizing the woman reflected back at her. The wedding dress, ordered from Denver, was simpler than most would expect for the daughter of James Montgomery. But it suited Clara perfectly, elegant without being ostentatious, beautiful without restricting movement. You look just like your mother, James said from the doorway, his voice thick with emotion. Clara turned to face her father. Do you think she would approve? Of Dawson, I mean. She would adore him, James assured her. Almost as much as she adored you. He crossed the room and took Clara's hands in his. I owe you an apology, Clara. I've spent so many years trying to protect you that I nearly smothered the very spirit that makes you special. Oh, Father, Clara said, squeezing his hands. When your mother died, I was terrified of losing you too, James continued. I thought if I could just find you a suitable husband, someone safe and predictable, you'd be taken care of. But that's not what I needed, Clara said gently. No, James agreed. You needed what your mother and I had, a true partnership. And that's what you found with Dawson. Clara blinked back tears. I have, haven't I? He's a good man, James said. Strong enough to stand beside you without trying to stand over you. That's rare. It is, Clara agreed. And worth waiting for. The small church in Cottonwood Springs was filled to capacity. Everyone in the county, it seemed, had come to witness the marriage of Clara Montgomery, the woman too stubborn to marry, to the former deputy marshal who matched her spirit. Dawson waited at the altar, his expression a mixture of awe and disbelief as Clara walked down the aisle on her father's arm. When James placed Clara's hand in Dawson's, the look that passed between the bride and groom spoke volumes. Dearly beloved, the minister began, but Clara barely heard the familiar words. She was lost in Dawson's eyes, in the promise of a future built on mutual respect and love. I do, she said when the time came, her voice clear and certain. I do, Dawson echoed, squeezing her hands. And then they were husband and wife, stepping out into the bright Colorado sunshine to begin their life together. 1 year later, Clara sat on the porch of their home, a comfortable house on a parcel of Montgomery land that James had given them as a wedding gift. Dawson had been appointed the new sheriff of Cottonwood Springs 6 months earlier, bringing law and order to a town that sorely needed it. Clara's hand rested on her swollen belly, feeling the baby move within. For more months, the doctor had said. For more months, until their family grew. Dawson appeared on horseback, returning from his daily rounds. Clara watched him dismount with the easy grace that still made her heart skip a beat. How are my 2 favorite people today? He asked, climbing the porch steps to kiss her. Restless, Clara replied with a smile. Both of us. Dawson knelt before her, placing his hand atop hers on her belly. He's going to be as stubborn as his mother. Or she will be as stubborn as her father, Clara countered. Dawson laughed. Either way, we're in for an adventure. I wouldn't have it any other way, Clara said softly. As the sun set over the Colorado mountains, painting the sky in brilliant oranges and pinks, Clara reflected on the journey that had brought her here. From the moment she'd posted that reward notice, determined to recover her father's cattle without any man's help, to this quiet evening with the husband who had become her partner in every sense of the word. Her father had been right about one thing: she was too stubborn to settle for a conventional marriage. And Dawson had been right too, that stubbornness was not a flaw but a strength, a testament to knowing one's own mind and heart. Together, they had built something rare and precious, a marriage of equals, bound not by society's expectations but by deep mutual respect and love. It wasn't always easy. 2 stubborn people were bound to clash occasionally, but it was real and true and worth every challenge. As Dawson took her hand and helped her to her feet, Clara knew with absolute certainty that she had found exactly what she never knew she was looking for. Not a man to rescue her, but a partner to stand beside her as they faced life's adventures together.